I'm the e-resources coordinator over here. We are excited to be partnering with PressbooksEDU to offer a 30% discount to MOBIUS members on their silver and gold subscription plans. And today we have Liz Mays and Taylor McGrath from Pressbooks to talk a little bit about the platform and the benefits of subscription, and kind of just give you an overview of how it works and what you're able to get through this offer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina, for that introduction. And I just wanted to mention that we had talked just prior to the call, some people had asked us to record this, so we are doing that now. If anyone would like their piece scrubbed from the recording, let me know after the call. And feel free at any time to put any questions in the chat. I believe my colleague Taylor will be monitoring that and raising any questions as I go along. And I really appreciate this opportunity to show you what PressbooksEDU is all about. So I guess without further ado, I will start to share my screen and show you what it can do. I am going to find the right screen. Hold on. Does everyone see a red dashboard? Great, fantastic. Okay. So I am actually, I have a few windows loaded up here, and I'm actually going to start with this one. This is the homepage of a PressbooksEDU network. This happens to be UC Berkeley's PressbooksEDU network. And as you can see, they've been able to customize the look of it to fit their institution. So they have put their logo up. They've used a background image that suits their program. They have changed the copy for the title of their program and the subtitle. And then they've used the blocks in various ways on the homepage. Another example is University of Saskatchewan, and you can see that their network looks similar but different, again with their branding, their colors, their logo, their background image, using the blocks in different ways. And then they've also made use of the carousel catalog on the network homepage. And if you go to the complete catalog, you'll see a range of works that they've done in the year or so that they've had this system. To get a book into the catalog, it would need to be public, but just having your book be public doesn't necessarily put it in the catalog. So the catalog can be a more curated selection of the books that you've produced on your network. An example of how that might be used is we have some schools where they are using the networks for a variety of different use cases. And in some cases, the books get a heavier level of sort of university and institutional vetting and support. And in some cases, those are the books that end up in the catalog, whereas other faculty may also be able to use the system for different course materials or projects, but some of those may or may not end up in the catalog. And different institutions use this however they would like to use it, but it is a feature that comes with the plan. What I'm going to show you next is what we call a web book, and this is a digital online version of a public book that was built on a PressbooksEDU network, in this case Rebus Communities Network. And you can see that it has a title and a description and attribution of who worked on it, also the license information, and several ways to read the book, both online and in other ways. What's nice about our PressbooksEDU systems is they allow you to showcase the book in a variety of export formats on the homepage if you choose to use this feature. And this can be really nice. For instance, if you have students who might be offline or potentially in rural areas or traveling on an airplane, they can access some offline reading versions of the book, such as the PDFs, or they could download a copy for their e-reader if that's something they wanted to do. Other people could take some of these more open formats and remix the book regardless of whether they had a Pressbooks network. So surfacing these exports is a really nice feature for students and others. You can also read the book online, and it is mobile responsive, which is really nice. We hear a lot about students wanting to read their textbook or their course materials on their cell phone, and you can completely do that with a book built on Pressbooks. Lots of ways to navigate the book. You can use the next buttons. You can navigate from the table of contents. And you can see a variety of ways where you can navigate this in succession or jump around in the book and scroll down. This is what we would call a chapter, for example. So after showing you sort of the basis of what that looks like, I'm going to take you inside a network. This happens to be just our own demo network. This is not a client network. So I'm inside of this, and I'm going to use it to show you sort of first the basics of creating a book or an OER on Pressbooks, and then some of the more fun educational features that you can utilize with Pressbooks. So the first thing you would do if you're wanting to create a book is you would click Create a New Book. And I'm just going to call this and I'm going to work on this privately. You have the option in Pressbooks to work on a book privately, to work on it publicly, or to make the book public, but then make different parts of it private. And that can be really handy, for instance, if you are an instructor and you're creating a book that you know you're going to add to every semester, where maybe you have most of the chapters that you're using that semester are live, and then you're still maybe working on the one for the 15th week of that module, or maybe you know you're going to release some more material for the coming semester. You can still be working on that as you go along. So I've just created the book, and it's going to take me now to a dashboard that probably looks somewhat like WordPress. Pressbooks is a heavily customized app built on WordPress, so a lot of this will look familiar. In Pressbooks, instead of pages and posts, we have what we call parts and chapters, but you can give them different terminology if you want. So for instance, this is a part, and then chapters sit within parts. So I can edit these and create more of them. One thing I typically try to do is to structure the book ahead of time, although you can do it as you go. But I might say Module 1, for instance, and then going back to my dashboard, I can add another part. So we'll call that Module 2. You might make these thematic, for instance. They don't have to be numbered like this, but this is for the purposes of demonstration. And then let's say we have a chapter 1, so let me add another chapter. And then my text would be here in the visual editor. You can always go into the text editor to see the code behind what you're typing in case there's something you want to start customizing. I just press create. And then I can also move these around. So what's nice is as I'm structuring the book, if I make decisions and realize, you know, this actually fits better in Module 2, I can just drag and drop or use the move up and move down keys to do that. Another thing I might do at the outset of creating a book or an OER is I would add the metadata. And there are different pieces to that, and you can use whichever ones you are appropriate for your use case here. You can add a title, subtitle, short title. You can create and add new contributors, even people who do not have access to the system. So this could be handy, for instance, in adding a faculty member who isn't necessarily interested in having access to the technology, but is still working on, for instance, an OER at your institution. So now that I've created that contributor, they're here for me to choose from. For instance, if you were creating a book for a faculty, that assures that you won't be named as the author or something accidentally. You can also credit a variety of other types of contributors that you might have on any book or OER, and some that are, this is a more general field for those who might not fit these categories above. You would also be able to indicate the publisher, the city, publication date, things like your ISBNs or your DOI if you have it. You can add a cover for the ebook and the webbook here, and then categorize your book if you'd like to. Probably the most important thing is the copyright area and the licensing area. Of course, here you can indicate who owns the copyright, but more important, here you can tell Pressbooks what the license on this book is. And so one of the key features of Pressbooks is that it enables you technologically to actually utilize the permissions that these different Creative Commons licenses might grant. So whatever you select here, and we do support the full range of licenses, so you can create all rights reserved content, you can create public domain content, or any of the Creative Commons licenses or CC0. But whatever you choose here is going to tell Pressbooks whether that book is clonable by another system. So if you like the OER you're creating to be broadly usable and replicable and remixable by others who are doing similar work at different institutions, and you choose one of these licenses, Pressbooks will know, oh, I can let, for instance, Ohio State sees your book and says, wow, I'm going to pull that for my classroom as well, and I'm going to adapt it. If it were licensed in a way where that is permissible and they happen to have a Pressbooks network, they can instantly clone an editable version of that book. And so this is really the setting that tells Pressbooks whether that's possible or not. So I'll CCBY and I'll save that. Jumping ahead, pretending that we've set up an entire book here, what you would do is you would choose what you want your book to look like. So we have about 20 different themes to choose from, and they work very similarly to applying a theme in WordPress. You just choose the theme you like and you activate it. And then when you're ready to preview the book, or if you're ready to export your files for publication, then you go to the export screen and those changes will be reflected. So for instance, here I can choose any of these formats to create exports of. It's really up to me. I can choose all of them. I can choose some of them. I'll just choose this one for now and click export, and you can see I get a little bit of a progress bar to show me how that's going. And then the exports will appear for download here. And once something has exported, I can take that and I can do whatever I want with it. So I could, for instance, put this EPUB in an ebook store somewhere. You could easily take the PDF. It's really designed for print on demand. You could take that to your bookstore for printing. You could take it to Ingram Spark or Lulu or other print on demand vendors you might use. These in particular, the Common Cartridge 1.1 export is a format that will show up on PressbooksEDU Silver plans, and then the Common Cartridge 1.3 with LTI links will show up on PressbooksEDU Gold plans. And these will help you take the book into your learning management system with varying degrees of seamlessness, depending on your plan. So there's also a button to choose whether or not to showcase the latest versions of these exports on your book homepage. So like I showed you, if you mark that setting yes, you will essentially see those exports show up here, whichever you've selected to show. So that is sort of the basics of creating a book or an OER in Pressbooks. One other thing I'll show just on this note is theme options. So you may have a theme you like, but you want to customize something about it. Maybe it's the colors of the text boxes or something like that. A lot of things we have surfaced in a way where you wouldn't need to get into CSS or code to make those types of minor customizations. So here are a lot of different choices you can make about your book layout without going into the code. There are options that apply to all the formats, which are the global options. There are web options that apply to that web book I had shown you. There are PDF options, probably the most important of which is the trim size, but you can also, if you want to, get into customizing things like the margins and the footers and the running heads. And then ebook options, which include things like compressing your images. Essentially, what happens here that's really nice in Pressbooks is that since you're creating these from a single source, whenever you change these theme options and save those changes, Pressbooks is going to automatically reflow your manuscript. And so there's no, sort of page by page finagling of things to look right again. Pressbooks just automatically makes all the formats look right. And that is extra nice because you're not having to do those changes manually in multiple formats either. So I'm actually I've lost my chat window, and I'm going to pause really quick to see if there are any questions in the chat, or Taylor, maybe I'll ask you.
There are not any questions in the chat yet.
Okay. Okay.
Feel free to send some.
Yeah. Okay. So I will then move on to some of the more educational features and cool things that you can do with an education-specific book. For that, I'm going to go into a book that's already kind of pre-set up to showcase some of these features for you. And so one of the things I think is really fun is the glossary feature. And you can use that in a variety of ways. Oops, I think I see something in the chat.
Yes. What capabilities does Pressbook provide through LTI?
Great question. And I will actually be sure to include some time to demonstrate these. There are a few things you can do. Essentially, you can take those exports with the web links and you can include essentially an embedded link to chapters of the book in your course. The more seamless integration is the full LTI integration, which will essentially take a Pressbooks book, and that will enable it to look very seamless in the LMS. And so when you bring it in that way with the full integration, what will happen is that Canvas or whatever your LMS happens to be will break the book up into different chapters, really forming like a spine of your course in the LMS. It will also sync, so if you do any changes on the Pressbook side, those will instantly appear inside as though they're inside the interface. Another thing that is nice is it removes the Pressbooks navigation around the book in your LMS, so there's no chance of students getting confused or having to click an external link to go outside of the LMS. It really keeps the students in the LMS and feeling like they're in the LMS. So there's a couple benefits to that, and I promise I will actually do like a little demo of that toward the end of this presentation. Great question. Super. Okay. So speaking back to the glossary term, I will show you what this looks like in practice. Pressbooks can help you create glossary terms inside the text and then an auto-generated glossary from those terms. So for instance, this is a glossary term and in a web book, and when I click on it, it essentially brings a definition down for me. So how was that made? I can go into this chapter, looking for the edit button here, scrolling all the way down, sorry about that. And you'll see that there's a short code around that term, but I didn't personally have to come up with that short code or think about that short code. So let me remove this to show you how that gets there. So basically, let's assume that I want to make this glossary term. So I highlight the term and I click this GL in the visual editor menu. I could either create and insert a term or I could choose an existing term. This term happens to exist in the book, so I'm going to insert it. And as you'll see, Pressbooks added this short code to tell Pressbooks this is a glossary term, treat it like a glossary term. So then I'll save my changes, and then that term will be back in the chapter. Another way I could do this is I could go to glossary terms and I could add a new glossary term. And for the sake of demonstration here, I'm going to create that. Moving my own window off here. Okay. And another thing that's important is this checkbox. So when I created that, I checked this box, which will determine whether or not this term shows up in an auto-generated glossary. So if I want to auto-generate a glossary from all the terms I've created in the book in any method, all I would need to do is go to add a piece of back matter, and I can call this anything I want. So I will just call it new glossary. And I just leave this blank, but I tell Pressbooks that the type of this back matter item is glossary. And then I press create, and you can see it's blank in the visual editor, and then Pressbooks will auto-populate that glossary with the terms that had the checkbox to show them in this auto-populated glossary. And you'll see that our new term is in here. Another thing that I think is a nice interactive element is called H5P. And what that does is it allows you to create actually 40 different types of interactives, the most useful of which I think are things like quizzes for formative assessment. So your students can be reading your textbook and then you go through and there's a point at which you want them to test themselves on what they've learned. You can do that with for instance, a multiple choice quiz question. You can also do it with drag the words or identify the verbs or different things they offer. And the way to create those is you just select H5P, and this was pre-activated on the network, but there's all you would have to do is just press the yes, activate this on the network, and then, excuse me, activate this on the book. And once you've activated it, these types of options will appear to you. So I would just write my question here, my answer, let's call that answer 1 is correct. And then this is more of the question, metadata. And then I'm going to create this quiz. And you'll see that a short code appears here. So I can take that and I can put that anywhere in the book, and then it will show that quiz in the webbook. So let's say I want to add that quiz in the middle of this chapter. I can add it anywhere I want. Let's just put it right here. I'll save that. And then when I go to the book, you'll see that it's included this. So I can take that, I can retry. And these can also be reused or embedded or different things. I think probably the best live example of this is this Portuguese open textbook that was built at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. When you look at it, the way they've structured it is they have lessons and then they have dialogues. And in the dialogue, they include a lot of these interactive elements. So first, they've embedded an audio clip that you can listen to that has dialogue, and then they have put the text of that dialogue after the audio clip. And then they also have some quizzes on this. So I will choose this. Oh, I am wrong. Okay. And then they've also used some of the other H5P interactives. So here you might mark all of the conjugated forms of the verb. And however you might want to do, and then you can check your results again and retry, of course. They use this throughout the book in different ways, but that gives you an example of some of the possibilities for a tool like this. Another thing that is nice is the text box feature. So a lot of times you want your book not to be too texty. You want to make sure that students can scan through the book pretty easily and don't get, stuck or too buried in too dense of a passage of text. So I like to use the text boxes a lot. And here's an example of what some of these look like. We have a variety of pre-built formats that you can use, and then in the theme options I showed you, in most themes you can customize, for instance, the colors of these, which will, gives you an added layer to make it your own. And these are pretty easy to insert. So going into this chapter with bunches of text boxes, I'm going to scroll down until I find a place to put my cursor, and then I'll just use, here we go. I will just use the text box dropdown to insert my favorite types of text boxes. I really like these. And then you can, of course, edit all of these things within the text box as well. You can also embed things like video or similar things. There are some interactives called PhET simulations where we have made it possible to essentially include a link to a PhET simulation, and that can be used inside your book as well. A similar thing we've done, which I don't have loaded up here, is the night timeline out of, I believe it's MIT Lab. They have a really nice timeline thing that they have built, and you can embed timelines in Pressbooks using that tool. Another thing that you can do is include video in your textbook or embed video. So here is what that would look like on a web book. And again, you can do this in between different passages of text. This is just an example. And that's done pretty simply. You just include the URL to the video on YouTube or Vimeo or someplace similar. We have about 20 different places that are whitelisted. And if there's something else that you use at your university, like Kaltura or something else, that's something we can whitelist on a case-by-case basis. If you looked at the text editor, you'd see that all I had to insert was the link to the YouTube video. So if I do that, it just becomes like an embed here. And I'm going to pause again there and see if we have any questions in the chat. Oh, thanks for that, Taylor.
No problem. No questions so far. I did want to mention that you can also add the H5P directly from the editor. You see the button above the visual editor by the Add Media button. So you don't always have to just paste the short code over from that.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, you can do it while you're in there. Guy says, what export formats can display H5P or media? So that'll be the webbook. And the webbook in any other format, as like in an LMS. The other exported formats don't handle interactive elements, but we have graceful fallbacks for those, so that when you put in H5P elements or you put in videos, there will be a link to that content that the student can click to go to.
Yes, and it just is like a little placeholder with the link.
Another question was, how do the interactive components translate into portable print formats? Right, so they're designed as little boxes that will refer a student directly to that piece of content in a digital format. If it's a digital PDF or an ebook, that link will exist. If it's a print PDF, they'll just have to type in the link or copy paste it if they're looking at it on a screen still. But there's always a signal that there was content there and what the content was and how to get to it.
Definitely. Okay, so we will stay tuned for more chat questions. And in the meantime, I guess I will show a little bit about the LTI integration, with the caveat that I actually don't have access to a university's LMS that has this enabled. So I'm using essentially a demonstration instance of Canvas. So there are just one or two discrepancies there, but I will explain that in a second. So here I'm logged in as a network manager again to this demo site. So this is essentially not belonging to any institution, but this is set up where it would have the LTI integration like a gold system would have. And to use that, I go to LTI consumers under integrations, and I can create a new LTI connection. So if this were, for instance, a university network, you might have multiple LMSs in use, and here's where you would create different connections to those. So I might call this, Moodle connection or something like that, and then I would make up a name for the key here, and you'll see there's a secret generated. I enable it, I protect it, and then I save the changes, which I'm not actually going to do here, but that's how the connection itself is built. Then if I want to pull content from a network that has the connection to their LMS, I can do that. Hold on, I would need to first take an export. So I'll use this book here. So if the LTI integration is enacted on your network, if you have a gold network, you will see this option here. And this is the option that will give you the most seamless LTI integration. So what I do is I take an export of that book, which I had done just a little bit earlier as well. So I've already downloaded this to my computer, and then I have uploaded it into, oh goodness, I've lost my Canvas window, into Canvas. Hold on just a moment. Let me pull up.
In the meantime, there's a question. Does the LTI need to be at the course level in Canvas, or can we put it in at the account or enterprise level?
Right. If you had the connection, you'd probably be putting it in at the account enterprise level. Normally, the individual faculty would not have access to the screen I just showed you. So with each network, you would have a certain number of support contacts who are what we call network managers. They typically don't need to do anything technical necessarily, but they would be the ones to give that code, this key and secret pair to the IT team that has that access at the account enterprise level to whatever learning management systems you have in play. In theory, they could authorize it at the course level as long as the connection is there on your network. I have heard of people doing that, but generally most people are going to use it at the account enterprise level. So I've created a course which I've called Demo 3. And this is an example where I have included, imported the content that I just exported. And the way that I did that was I went to Settings and Import Course Content. And this gives me a screen where I can select the common cartridge package, and then I have pre-downloaded to my desktop this particular book that I just exported, and then I'm going to choose to import the all content and click import there. And what will happen, you can see I did this just a little while ago. It will say there's one issue to address, and then I'll address that in the settings field. So, or maybe it won't say there's an issue because I've already done that on this book, but I would then go to Settings and App Configurations. And I would look, this comes up because I uploaded that content. And here's where I can edit things like the key, the secret, the domain would be from the particular network in question. I would make this public, and then I would press save, submit, excuse me. And then that content will show up in the demo book. So I have a couple different examples of what this looks like. I'm going to go to Demo 2. So for instance, this is that book which I've preloaded into this Canvas instance. And then what I've done is I've created different activities around it. So I've used this book as the spine of my semesterly course. So each part might become a module in Canvas, and then each chapter has become a page here in Canvas. And I, of course, can make these public or private to the students, and then I can also add other things around them. So here I've added a discussion using discussion board. Here I've added an exercise. There are a couple other, here's an assignment. Earlier in the book, I've added a quiz. And so you can, of course, move things around in the LMS as well. This will look just a smidge different than it will with a real university system of Canvas. This is, again, a free demo instance of Canvas, and one thing I have not been able to get rid of is the scroll bar, which shouldn't actually show using the real integration. But you can see this essentially keeps students reading this content or engaging with this content inside the interface. And what you see here is actually the navigation from Canvas. So the Pressbooks navigation is not there, is not confusing. Another thing that this will do is if you do have hypothesis on a chapter, for instance, let me pick a chapter that does have it on there. I think there's some in here. Oops. Sorry about that. You also have the option of viewing the hypothesis annotations in this window as well. So let's see if there are any public annotations. If there were annotations on this particular chapter, they would show here. You can view, hypothesis is available to enable on Pressbooks for you at a per book level. So different faculty might or might not want that option, but you can enable it on parts of your book, on all of your book, and you can dictate at a very granular level where you want the annotation option to appear. So one thing you might do with that is, for instance, utilize that for a deeper, more meaningful discussion. So instead of just having a book that is sort of a static object that students are expected to consume, you can have that book be a two-way conversation of students to students, commenting on the book, reflecting on their reactions to the book, discussing aspects of the book. You can as a faculty member, you can join in that conversation. You can be having conversations with the authors and editors of that book, and then with the public at large. So it enables these multi-directional conversations. A good example, let me find one where I absolutely know there's some annotations on here. You'll see that they show up here as sort of highlighted areas. And when I open the hypothesis window, I can then click on these annotations and read what other people have said. What's also nice about hypothesis, which is again like a plugin that we have enabled, is that you can also have, in addition to just public conversations, you can set up on the hypothesis side private conversations or private groups, and you can invite the students to those groups. So you could instruct your students to comment in a private discussion channel using that tool as well. Another thing that people are using the LTI connection for is occasionally they might be using Pressbooks to create a course reader of copyrighted content, which really shouldn't be public on the web. You can enable with the LTI the full integration. You can have the book be private on Pressbooks and then have it still show up to students in the LMS. So that is another benefit to using it in that way.
Liz.
Does that? Yes.
There's a question. There are no capabilities to create graded H5P assignments in Pressbooks and then pass the results to Canvas, are there at this time?
No, at this time there are not. That is a feature that we do plan to develop. It will be a separate product. It will not be part of the Silver or Gold plan, but it is on our roadmap as soon as possible. So it's something we're talking about. Many people who've expressed interest in Pressbooks or who are current clients, that is something they are wanting us to add. So I have pretty good confidence that at some point that will be available. But again, it will be a separate feature.
Okay, that was it.
Okay, great. Well, I think I'm going to pause there, and I'm actually going to ask you, Taylor, what have I forgotten? Because we have some extra time.
Oh man, put on the spot like that. I think you covered all the coolest stuff.
Okay, great. So I guess I will encourage some more questions and go from there. Normally this takes me a little closer to an hour, so I hope I haven't talked too fast. Christina, was there anything you specifically wanted me to address that I haven't touched on yet?
I think you've covered everything I expected to be covered.
Great.
I can maybe speak to a couple other features.
Great.
So one is that if there are there are people who are working on these books that are more comfortable working in Markdown, we recently made a plugin available that you can turn on a Markdown editor and create your books in Markdown. Berkeley uses that a lot. I think it's more compatible if you're coming from, say GitBooks or something, and you're used to drafting on different platforms. There's, of course, Mathjax, which we just released in Quick LaTeX. So people creating STEM textbooks will be working a lot with that kind of stuff. We recently added the Mathjax feature to our lineup to increase the accessibility of this math rendering markup and let you do math equations that weren't just in LaTeX, but also in MathML and ASCII math. There's also, we did recently do a full, thorough back-end administrative evaluation of all of the pieces that you're seeing here, all of the pages that help you make your book. All of those are as close to 100% accessible as we can get them, and we're working with other pieces of software and trying to get all of that as accessible as possible for our users. There's a bunch of language capabilities. I know she showed you the Portuguese book earlier. There's different levels of language that interchange throughout Pressbooks. You can set the metadata language for your book, but you can also set a separate language for your interface. We recently got 100% French translation on the Pressbooks platform, so we're 100% in both French and English. And those are constantly growing translation levels as well from our community. We're also compatible with the Zotero citations tool. Anybody using Zotero can grab a webbook's metadata and keep that in their citations. Somebody says, could you show the Mathjax so we can see what it's like, Liz?
Yeah, I saw that. And Taylor, where do I find that nowadays?
Oh, goodness. So if you have Quick LaTeX turned off, you should be able to find it in your settings.
Okay, great. Let's find out if I have Quick LaTeX turned off.
Yep, Mathjax is right there.
Okay. Ah, perfect. Okay. True confessions, I don't do a lot of STEM textbooks in Pressbooks. So what would a person do if they were here? They would just change these settings, Taylor, to their liking for their Mathjax output?
Sorry. Yeah, so you've got the syntaxes listed here that Mathjax is compatible with, LaTeX, ASCII Math, and MathML. There aren't too many settings right now. We're still developing a couple of them. This is we just released this last week, y'all. So don't blame me for not being prepared on this. So you can set the text color, and you can also set a couple different fonts. And so the cool thing about this is that when you generate math, and maybe I can take over, it would be better if I screen shared for this.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay.
So I'll stop sharing.
That's fine.
And while you're setting that up, I'm going to address another question in the chat, the accessibility capabilities. So essentially, we do have a VPAT, as Taylor mentioned, that is available on our website. That is mainly for the interface for the creators. I think what you're asking about right here is, do we force people to essentially create content that will be accessible? The short answer is no, it will not force you to use things like headers and the right colors and put alt text into your images and all of those things you should do to build any content anywhere that is educational and accessible. However, there are some resources built in the ecosystem about creating accessible content in that way, and that is something that we address as part of any of the plans. We do trainings not only with your support contacts, but also with your users, and that's a thing that we would mention. Of course, here's how to make sure that your content is accessible to people when you're building that in Pressbooks. And then I'm going to put another resource in the chat, which is the BC campus is a heavy user of Pressbooks, and they've created an open textbook accessibility toolkit of how to make books accessible in Pressbooks. So I'll post that here as well. And Taylor, I realized I didn't demonstrate cloning either.
There, okay, can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so this is the Mathjax settings page. Again, you've got all of these syntaxes. I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna grab straight from the examples here. Okay. I'm gonna create myself a new chapter. So I put in the LaTeX shortcodes. That's one of the syntaxes that's compatible here, and the equation inside of it. And I'll go ahead and create this. And I'm going to show you the web book, because while this the SVGs look great in the export formats, the great part of Mathjax comes into play in the web book version of this. Because you have all of these options that come with Mathjax that make it accessible and that allow you to allow the user, the reader, to be able to see it in different ways. So you can see how to convert it into different LaTeX version, or the different math syntaxes if you're creating other open textbooks. So it's accessible and open in that way. You can also enable other accessibility features. So let's say I want to zoom this into 300% whenever I'm hovering, and I can set that for an entire book. And then whenever I hover, it'll load up to that size. And then you have all of the languages for the admin that come with Mathjax, as well as these other accessibility features and the things that allow you to change the background and the foreground and the colors, anything that makes it better for you to read through the book. And again, they're scalable vector graphics. So no matter what size they are in your ebooks and your PDFs, they're always going to look great. So that's kind of how the Mathjax works. Unfortunately, I'm not super adept at ASCII Math or MathML, or I would throw some of that up there for you pretty quickly too. Did you want me to go ahead and go through cloning, Liz?
Yeah, go ahead while you're in there.
Okay. All right, let's find a book. Making open textbooks with students. From the Rebus community is a CCBY book, and I can check there and see that the copyright allows me to create copies. Then this is on a Pressbooks network. So all I need to do is grab that URL, and then I will go back into my textbook. And from any admin page on Pressbooks, you just have to go to My Catalog and clone a book, put in your source book URL. I will say that I want this URL to be Making Open Textbooks 1, because I've probably already cloned this before. And I'll customize my title there and clone the book. So another thing about the nuances of the copyright levels here is that you can actually set CC BY licenses, any Creative Commons or all rights reserved license at a chapter level. So say a guide to making open textbooks with students is a CC BY book. I can clone that, but say there's one chapter that is all rights reserved that they wanted to remain protected by that, then that chapter would not clone when you took the rest of the book in. So we'll check here, the progress bar says we're good. And then we've got our fully cloned book with 47 glossary terms, 2 front matter, 5 parts, etc. And here we are. And we can go and visit our cloned book. And so you can clone a book from any Pressbooks network as long as it is public and has an open license that allows derivatives. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Great. And I will just add to that there's a couple different ways that you can use that might be useful. You can use it to create just a clone to adopt. You can use it to create an editable version that you're going to, for instance, remove some chapters, add other chapters, make edits inside the text. You can do all of those things if you're adopting and remixing a book. Another way that we've seen people use this is to make a master clone of a textbook that is fairly well established as an open textbook, but maybe an entire department is planning to adopt that textbook. So from the master clone for that university, they may make 20 copies on their network and hand control of one copy to each of the faculty that teach that subject at the university. And that enables the faculty not to have to come to complete consensus on exactly how the textbook should be adapted. It allows them to localize the examples to the way they teach. It allows them to rearrange the content if they teach things in a different order, for instance, or to just make minor edits that they may just feel are absolutely crucial. So having that cloning feature becomes a way to incentivize remixing of OER, which is sometimes at the institutional level easier to incentivize than starting from scratch and creating an OER, a full book by yourself.
Another thing I like is that any book that has been cloned, the network that cloned it has the ability to turn on a book level or a chapter level across the book comparison tool. So if you've enabled that and you've made changes to a book and you want people to be able to see those changes, you can have that appear at the end of the book and people can go back and see, okay, this is the difference between the version I'm looking at and the version that exists in the original network.
Great. So I think we may have about covered it. I'm going to see, oh, I see another question. I know you mentioned the LMS capabilities, but what other features are plan specific? That's a great question. So I'll talk about that for just a moment. With the educational plans, the base plan, what we call the silver plan, includes the basics of what you would need to create OER and educational content. So that is the cloning tool, some of these wonderful plugins we've talked about, like the H5P plugin, the Hypothesis plugin, Mathjax, another called TablePress for sophisticated table creation, also plugin that, or excuse me, the integration with your university's Google Analytics account is possible on those plans as well. It also includes the thin common cartridge exports with web links. So all of that is included on the silver plan, as well as a layer of training for your support contacts as well as your users, and then support for the designated support contacts that you have designated to be the liaisons to Pressbooks. On the gold plan, that is really for instances where the university wants a deeper integration with its existing infrastructure. So with that, you might be in need of the full integration with your learning management system or systems in place at the university, and that's something that we are glad to do with the gold plan. You also have the option to purchase for a one-time configuration fee. There is an SSO authentication option that is available to purchase on the gold plan as well. So generally, unless you need those university integrations, the basic plan should have what you need.
There's also small differences in the amount of storage for the different plans, as well as trainings at this time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other questions? I'll give people just a moment. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I guess we can close up here, but if you do have other questions after this event, please feel free to contact us. You can reach me at sales@pressbooks.com, and please feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to sidebar with you individually, or talk about your individual needs at your institution, or go deeper into any of this. So I hope to hear from some of you on this call, and it's been a pleasure spending this hour with you today. So thank you again for your time.